Alan, if you could start bringing them up, we'd love to see their smiling, cheerful faces. There's Susan, and while everyone's popping up, I think that Susan would like to say a few words to you all while our staff's coming on up.
I would. You know, it's been a long and very different year for most of us, but we all want to thank you for your continued support. Like many nonprofits serving our community, our team has never lifted its feet off the gas pedal. We've pivoted, thought creatively all year long, and we fought to keep our open spaces, parks, and trails open when others closed across the country. We've created new programs, such as our Trail Ambassador program and the Get Out, Get Healthy program, both of which are going to launch in January. And we've never stopped being your staunch advocates and voices for your beloved outdoor spaces. This team you're seeing right here is filled with passion, and I know we all feel proud and lucky to serve you and our outdoor spaces. For those of you that have already made end-of-year donations or have donated through our Indie Give campaign, we want to thank you. If you haven't, and you're able, there's still time to make a donation. Your donations are what make all of our work possible, and we thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Susan. I totally agree. I've been with this staff now for a year, and I have to agree, it's the most passionate, incredible staff. And all you members online right now are really lucky to have this group advocating and doing good work for you. So thank you guys for being here to join us all tonight. And we're gonna see everybody on staff throughout. And at the very end, we'll pull everybody up to have a question and answer. So take a good look at this staff. If you have any questions for any of them, hold it till the very, very end and we'll bring them all back on. So thanks, guys. So before we begin the trail mix, I just wanted to go over a couple pieces of housekeeping. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with how to be on a Zoom now, but our webinars are a little bit different. In case you haven't noticed, we have muted all of you and we have unshared your screens. So again, you can be your messy selves and we don't care. If you do want to communicate with us, if you have any questions that you want to ask or you just want to chat with us, there's a little Q&A icon at the very bottom of your screen. And we encourage you to type in any questions throughout, or if you want to just talk to us, Erin will be checking that throughout the entire webinar. After we have each presenter, we'll have a Q&A session with that presenter. So if you have questions specific to them, that would be a great time to ask them. And again, Erin will collect those and make sure that they're asked. And then we'll have a big Q&A at the end for quite literally anything you have to ask of us. So again, welcome. We're happy to be with all of you. Before we get started with our presenters, we always like to just get a general sense of who's on the call with us. So I'd love to pull up one of our poll questions that we'd love for you to participate in. We'll have a couple of them throughout. This first one, we want to know how often you read our weekly newsletter. As many of you know, we send out a newsletter every week, filled with information about volunteer work, information on trails. It does usually get a pretty big open rate, and we're hoping that it's you guys that are opening it and checking it out. So the answers are coming in, and it looks like about 60% of you actually read it every week. So thanks for staying in tune with us. And a handful of you read it when there's a topic of interest, which we try very hard to always have topics of interest there for you. And a couple of you read it every once in a while, but it's good to know. Our last question is, you even have a newsletter, and none of you opted as that for an answer. So I'm glad to know that you all know we have a newsletter. Awesome. Thanks for engaging with us that way. We're really excited to see that you guys engage with us on that way. We have another poll question. We know that a lot of you are interested in what's going on out at Corral Bluffs. We are very interested as well. So what we're really interested to know is, how do you plan to engage with it once it's open to the public? Are you looking at being out there right when it's open? Are you looking at making it out in the first couple months? Is it just on your long-term bucket list? You'll go out there when you have guests in town. You're not really that interested in it. It's not your cup of tea. Or what the heck is Corral Bluffs? It looks like the majority of you, overwhelming majority of you, are going to try to make it out within the first couple months. And there will be one or two of you knocking on the door when it first opens, ready to go. So that's awesome. That shows us that there's quite a bit of interest. Thanks, guys, for that. That's great. We're excited. Probably just as excited or more than you guys. So we're really, really lucky today. We have Britt Haley, joining us today to speak. Britt Haley is the TOPS program manager with the Colorado Springs Parks and Rec Department, and she's going to provide us some updates and answer any questions, which I'm sure some of you have about what's going on out there. And again, we'll have a Q&A with Britt at the end of her presentation. So feel free to hold all her questions, and she'll stick around after to talk about those. Britt, we know you are super, super busy this time of the year, and we feel very lucky that you're taking some time with us today. So I'm going to give the floor to you, and we're looking forward to hearing some updates.
All right, well, thank you. Can everyone hear me? You probably saw me making a funny face because I got a Zoom message that I needed to update my Zoom, and I was thinking this is not the time for that to happen. So everyone can hear fine?
We can hear and see you. Thank you.
Great. Okay. And Alan had been so kind to offer to, I did a few slides just to walk us through this opportunity. And I wonder, Alan, could you run the slides, or do you want me to share my screen and try that?
Sorry, Britt, my mute button was covered up. If you want to share your screen, it might be a little bit easier for you to advance on your side.
Let me see what I can do here.
But I can pinch hit if necessary.
Well, I know you're multi-talented. Can you guys see that coming up?
Yes, we can
Perfect.
see that. It looks great.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, so we are already winning. So I have been busy this year, opportunities for TOPS, and a great deal of that has related to the Corral Bluffs open space. In fact, on tomorrow, I go through a walkthrough on the last 40-acre piece for this year. And then on Thursday, we will close. So I thought I would tell you about kind of those opportunities and what we hope to do and what we want to do next. One thing I wanted to highlight with regard to Corral Bluffs open space is this is maybe the best time for anybody who's truly interested in that space to go out and see it. It is open to the public. If you work with the Corral Bluffs Alliance, they will take you out on a special guided hike with lots of information and lots of fun. So don't miss that opportunity. I know many people with TOSC have either done a special hike for TOSC members or have gone out with the Corral Bluffs Alliance, and that is a great way to see the property and really get a better understanding of what you're looking at too. So I am showing you right now our park system master plan, which is the map of all of our open space candidate areas. And of course, where I've got the big blue arrow is around Jimmy Camp Creek Regional Park and then Corral Bluffs open space. And you can see that we've got a pretty vast swath of that greenish colored opportunity zone, as I like to think of it, in terms of open space person areas. But we'd like to expand to provide better resources on our eastern side for the eastern residents, similar to what we already have on the west side. One thing I kind of want to point out to everyone is if you see a circle down there on the bottom right-hand corner, that's what at the time of the park system master plan was called the Upper Williams Creek Reservoir, is now the Gary Bostrom Reservoir. Either way, that is going to be a very recreational water resource. And I think that maybe our next steps as we look forward to what our whole Pikes Peak region can offer is perhaps connectivity from Corral Bluffs South to that resource, so people have trail connections, maybe open space opportunities, and to be able to really incorporate that into a recreational area. So just keep that in the back of your mind as kind of the future opportunity. But now let's focus on what I've been doing this year around Jimmy Camp Creek and the Corral Bluffs area. So I'm going to start you on the left-hand side of this diagram where you can see Jimmy Camp Creek Regional Park. And that was, of course, received back in the 80s by the city through an when the first Banning Lewis Ranch annexation occurred. And that is a beautiful, marvelous area, just so full of many resources, whether they are biological and wildlife habitat oriented, with ponderosa pines and cottonwood trees and a riparian water source that runs year round because it is fed by these springs that keep the water there. And of course, you know what water does in the arid West, it allows for all kinds of amazing things to happen. Then in the middle, you see a block of properties, and we called those, those used to be owned by Colorado Springs Utility. Earlier this year, Parks and TOPS was able to purchase those connection properties, is what I like to call them, so that we could have a bigger complex area in this area. And those properties are now in the TOPS portfolio. And then over to the right, you've got your Corral Bluffs area that we've been adding to over time. There's a red square in the center, and that's the parcel that I'm working on purchasing on Thursday with unanimous approval from TOPS Working Committee, Parks Board, and City Council. So that's just been an amazing opportunity in holding property really in the Corral Bluffs space. And as you look at the way that Corral Bluffs goes down south, you can see State Highway 94. And that is probably the main, you think that is maybe the main entrance to the Corral Bluffs open space one day when it is developed for future use and public use. What I also want you to concentrate on as we go through this talk is the periwinkle color, because that is master plan candidate open space all around Corral Bluffs. And for the vast majority of that land, both to the left of Corral Bluffs and going up all the way to Jimmy Camp and up north toward Highway 24, all of that is owned by one owner. And they've got some really big plans too. And you can see we've got some gaps. I've got a gap here in between that portion that juts out toward Jimmy Camp. And I tell you, you could stand on the corner of that property, and even I, who is not the best athlete in the world, I could hawk a rock and hit Jimmy Camp Creek Park from that property. It's so close. And then you can also see that there's another periwinkle block right in between those connection properties in Corral Bluffs, and that is owned by that same owner as well. So we still have area that's of interest and would be valuable to acquire and would be helpful to really having the right kind of property for all of the needs that open space provides in a city that is rapidly growing to the east. So of course, many of you know that Corral Bluffs has absolutely amazing resources and really world-class resources. And one of them is the fossil discovery that became news last year about this time when the Denver Museum of Nature and Science published its first in a series of papers in the journal Science, and really finding a gap in the fossil record and being able to fill that gap with knowledge of what the first mammals that emerged after the cataclysmic, die-off of the dinosaurs occurred, and nowhere else on the earth had they found completely intact fossils like these going back 66 million years. So I've got a picture of Dr. Tyler Leeson on the right and working on these fossil discoveries, and it is truly one of the best things about Corral Bluffs and fascinating. And then I've got another slide coming up here that
I think that we lost Britt for a minute, right in the heart of what we wanted to know. That's what happens in the age of Zoom. We're going to wait for Britt to come back on, but in the meantime, why don't we go ahead and move forward? Because I'm not sure how long it'll take her to come back on. Man, I was really interested in what she had to say too, so I know you're all on the edge of your seat as well. Oh, I think we might have just got her back. There she is. Hi, Britt. We were just saying in the day of Zoom, that tends to happen. Do we have you fully back? I think you're still muted.
there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, there you go. I'm gonna give the floor back to you. We were all on the edge of our seat and then we lost you. So we're gonna give
That was
back.
so sad. I was like, oh, it's connecting. That's a bad sign.
All right, floor's back to you, Britt.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try to share the screen again, see if this will work for us. So this last acquisition came up at the end of the year, and it's really a property that almost got away from us because it had gone under contract with another buyer, and then that sale fell through, and I was contacted to see if we were still interested, and of course we were. So only had 5 meetings left, which is the bare minimum in terms of city council meetings to get one of these done. Was able to get it through TOPS, Parks Board, and the city council meetings, and now we're on to close. And what's great about this property is it's shared access to Highway 94 with Corral Bluffs. And so now we can really protect that access. So let me see if I can advance this. This is another aspect of the property that will help us with our public hikes, and that is it has a home with a well and a septic system. And, you know, it's not the grandest home that you've ever seen in your life, but it certainly is at the right place through the walk-in time hike that Sharon Alito likes to guide and that Kobo likes to guide to get you to a place where there's shelter, there's a restroom, there's a meat to have. And I've been out to Corral Bluffs many times, and boy, it's out there. It doesn't have, you know, a lot of services, so it's good to have this available for our public users, but also for the scientists at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science to really have a research area where they can have a space and continue their research. So the next steps for Corral Bluffs, really, you know, we've got a lot to do still. And, you know, as you all know, whenever you purchase a property, that's just the beginning, right? You don't have the opportunity to do these things unless you have those properties, but now we're on to those opportunities. So number one, I spent some time on that map because we still got to fill in some gaps. And you saw the 2 major gaps in the one property owner, which is the Norwood Development Company, and they are, you know, working on a framework, they call it, or a strategic plan for how they tackle all of that acreage they have. And they haven't yet released their thinking to us, but I am waiting, just like many of you are, to hear exactly what plans they have and how much they would be willing to sell to the TOPS program for Corral Bluffs and all of the things that we need in order to make that the right space for the resources that are there. Another thing that I want to do and am continuing to do is, of course, partner with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, because I swear to you, they have barely scratched the surface in terms of what is out there and available from a research perspective, from an education perspective. And we know that that's an irreplaceable resource. It could be really at the level of a World Heritage site in terms of United Nations World Heritage type activities. We have got that space right here on the eastern edge of Colorado Springs. And that, of course, guides me to the next bullet point. We really need to enhance our knowledge of this site. This site is really unique because we can, since it's not yet open to the public, we can really understand the impacts of public use by getting a baseline understanding of the before and after. And usually you just don't get any chance to do that. So we are so fortunate in that case. So what we've been doing is really understanding the wildlife and the biology. You remember doing bioblitzes out there and really understanding what we have now untouched, so that we can also then plan for the future to provide for that wildlife connectivity, the special species that are out there. We know we've got nesting golden eagles, we have ferruginous hawks, we have prairie falcons, we have absolutely fascinating wildlife opportunities in that Corral Bluffs complex. Another thing that, you know, I hadn't thought a great deal about, but I thank Bill Kerner and Corral Bluffs Alliance for thinking this through a little bit, is the hydrology of the Jimmy Camp Creek riparian area. And he has urged me to think this through, and I am absolutely putting all of my thought to it, that we really can't have that be like Cottonwood Creek, which has got an engineered drainage with lots of riprap and concrete, and really has destroyed the natural aspects of the riparian area in Cottonwood Creek. Jimmy Camp Creek is really, it's too special to do that too. And so we've really got to understand that hydrology and its natural state. And we can do that. We can study that now and be ready. From an archaeology standpoint, you would be fascinated and amazed by how much archaeology exists, not only at Corral Bluffs, but also at Jimmy Camp Creek. There are sites all over. I think we cataloged back in 2008, something like 4,500 sites just at Jimmy Camp. So a lot of archaeology. And then history. You all probably are remembering that this was part of the Goodnight Loving Trail. And we have a lot of that history of Colorado and of cattle drives. And that's why Corral Bluffs is named the way it is they used to drive the cattle up into the box canyons there and hold them, on their way up to Denver to be loaded onto at the rail yards. And then, of course, we've touched on the scientific research that's ongoing there and that needs to be ongoing, and how to really make that a good scientific research site in connection with all the other uses that Corral Bluffs can offer. One thing I want you all to think about is the fact that this site really can't be like some of our more active sites like Red Rock Canyon, open space, partly because passive uses are required. In Jimmy Camp Creek Regional Park, there is a passive use requirement in the annexation agreement that gave it. Of course, TOPS has restrictions too, no motorized use, those kinds of things. So we really probably need more space at Corral Bluffs to make sure that we can satisfy all of the desires for the loop trails and the experiences that the public would like to have, while also allowing for the research, educational aspects, the archaeological sites to be protected, and to really balance all of those interests. The wildlife corridors, if you think about the way that development is just coming across the prairie to our east, this is going to be the last refuge for those animals that, like the antelope, that need to move and still be there. And this may be the last place where they are at some point. And if we connect up all those spaces, we will have done ourselves a huge favor for the wildlife resources that are in this area. So all of that understanding and study will have to be a planning process, because those are very expensive processes to undergo. A typical master plan process, like at Austin Bluffs Open Space, over $200,000. So something as big as Jimmy Camp Creek plus Corral Bluffs, I'm thinking it's probably in the $400,000 range. But we can make that a less expensive if we don't have to pay the contractor to produce all of this information, if we've already got it available for them to use. So that is one of the thoughts I had, is why don't we get a head start on that? We'll have a better understanding of what we can do and how to do it well. But we also can maybe save some cost on this enormous project of doing a master plan for this area. The other thing to think through, certainly at the Parks Department, is operational. What will it take? How many staff? What facilities? What do we need to keep people safe out there at that site? And then, of course, a consideration of the site development costs that we would need in order just to get it open, and then also to make it really that world-class site that it really deserves to be. So that's a lot of food for thought on this afternoon's talk. So I think I will stop talking for a little bit, questions, and probably stop sharing my screen. How's that?
Thank you so much, Britt. That was so interesting. And I see that we have a question that has popped up, and Erin is going to be navigating our Q&As for us. So Erin, you want to share that with us so Britt can give us some more insight?
Definitely. Yeah, so once again, Britt, that was an amazing presentation. I learned so much from that. Can't wait to get back out there. The question that we did get was, is there a plan for a trail connection from Jimmy Camp to Bluestem?
Maybe not a plan that's been formed so much, but definitely a desire to do that. And that's what I was talking about in terms of, let's think about the Gary Bostrom Reservoir going south from Corral Bluffs, using the riparian or the greenway opportunities we have, and definitely bringing ourselves around to Bluestem. I think that, right now in our park system master plan, you will not see that, because it is kind of breaking news with these opportunities that have come around. And I guess I should just share with all of you that this year, 2020, we have added 894 acres to our open space portfolio. It has been an amazing year. And now we can look at connections and all those other opportunities that we might have.
Another question that we just got is this member is concerned about damage to the critical geologic assets. What are the initial thoughts on how to protect these once it's open to the public? Would some remain closed?
You know, that's such a good point. And
Oh no, I think we lost Britt again. Britt is at her house way out east where service is a little bit spotty. So Erin, we might have to get that answer from her in a little bit. Let's go ahead and move on. We do have those questions jotted down, and hopefully Britt can stay with us for a little bit. And we'll either capture those at the very end or when we can get her back on live. So that was wonderful. I'm so glad we got that update. We get questions about Corral Bluffs all the time. So what a treat to have Britt here to share that information with us. Another space that we got a lot of questions about is Cheyenne Mountain State Park. And before we introduce our next speaker, we want to see how often you guys are out using that space. I went on a hike with some members not too long ago and was shocked to learn that none of the members on the hike had ever been out there before. So share with us, have you been out there before? Have you never been? We've got a couple different questions at varying levels, and it looks like right now most of you have been there pretty often. A handful of you go at least once a year. It's nice to see. Oh, whoops, someone just said they've never been before, but they do want to head out that way, and you certainly should. It's a treat. Wonderful. Well, it looks like there's a mix of activity out there, but I would encourage everyone to check it out because it's a place I take my family often and dearly love it. Britt, I saw that you popped back on, and we do have a couple more questions for you, but we're going to hold those until you've got some stable internet again. So thanks for those feedback on Cheyenne Mountain. We're really glad to have with us today Jason Hagan. He is the Senior Park Ranger out at Cheyenne State Mountain Park. We're really lucky to have him take the time to talk to us today. So Jason, let's go ahead and get you going.
All right.
Here you are. Hey, Jason. Thanks for being here today. Happy to have you. And I'm going to give the floor over to you so you can talk to us about any updates or programs you have going on out there.
Perfect. Let me make sure this is working. Okay. Everybody see the PowerPoint presentation, hopefully?
Yep, we've got you. Thanks, Jason.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm the Senior Ranger here at Cheyenne Mountain State Park. Been here for a little while, about 5 years now. I'm just going to give some updates on the park, kind of what our year looked like and what hopefully next year holds for us here at the state park. So real quick, if for those of you that haven't been out to the park, this is kind of the trail map that we have here. So most of the park is only accessible by trail. We've got 28 miles of trails at this point. Most of those trails are hiking and biking only. We do have about 3 or 4, actually 6 miles of equestrian use trails at this point. And then about 2 miles of our trail system is open to dogs, and the rest of it is closed off to dogs. Excuse me. The newest trail system, or the newest trails that have been opened at the park is the Dixon Trail. So if you guys haven't had a chance to come out and hike the Dixon to the top of the mountain, it's spectacular to say the least. The Dixon Trail opened about 2 years ago now, and it leads to an old homestead site. There's a plane crash along the way. Once you get to the top of the mountain, there's a figure-8 trail system up there, and you get some just spectacular, amazing views. So we were pretty excited to finally get the Dixon Trail open and open up the top of the mountain to the public. That was a huge step for us here at the park. So if you get a chance to come out, definitely worth it. It's a long hike. If you start at the parking lot, it's about a 16 to 17 mile hike round trip. and it gains about 3,000 feet elevation to get up to the top of the mountain, but it is well worth it. A couple other things about the park, just so we're all on the same page here. We have about 61 campsites at this point. We have an archery range with a static range with targets from 10 yards all the way up to 80 yards. We also have a 3D field range with 24 3D animal targets. All of that is within the park, and if you're not familiar where the park is, we're on the south end of town, right across from Fort Carson. So 2020, I'm sure everybody's kind of heard this, but it's crazy. For all our state parks, we were overwhelmed with visitors this year. A lot, in Cheyenne Mountain was no different. We had increased visitation, about 15% above last year in increased visitation. Obviously, that puts a strain on staff and facilities, all that sort of thing. We here at Cheyenne Mountain, we fared pretty well. We don't have a lake, so that was pretty nice for us. A lot of the water-based parks saw visitation at 30%. So obviously with that, everybody's probably heard how, you know, crazy Lake Pueblo was this year. We had increased visitation, but we didn't get as much of the craziness that they might have seen or some of the other state parks have seen. So, but 2020 was definitely busy. With that, we had a lot of new users coming out to the park, a lot of people that never really got out and explored a state park or got out on the trails, a lot of new mountain bikers, a lot of people just picking up new hobbies since everything else was kind of closed for a lot of the year. So with that, we saw basically a lot of user conflicts between mountain bikers and hikers in particular. And so we decided to come up with a plan. And so we got a bunch of volunteers together and started a trail ambassador program here at the park. At this point, we have about 30 ambassadors. So we've trained 2 sessions of those people, and they are rocking. They're doing awesome work out there. As soon as about a month after the program started, our complaints from user group conflicts were down significantly. So it was a great program and just something that I wanted to highlight as a great way to educate the public and new users in this kind of a weird time that we're experiencing. Back in March, we did have a pretty significant wildfire on the park. It was along the northeast corner. So if you're familiar with the park, kind of right as you drive in the park, off to the right is where this fire happened. It was about 30 acres. It was contained within a day or two. No structures were threatened or lost. A lot of that was in part due to the fire mitigation that we've been doing and that our neighbors had been doing. So we were able to keep it down to a minimum and just kind of burned open space. So it wasn't the end of the world, but that was a significant event back at the beginning or at the end of March. What else do we got here? So I did want to talk a little bit about our fire mitigation program. Another group of volunteers here at the park put in hours and hours and hours of backbreaking work, clearing our fence line. This year they focused on our western fence line that borders Cheyenne Mountain Air Station. So they cleared a ton of trees, a ton of debris out of that area and did a lot of work. And as you can see, it was pretty steep terrain up there. So they were busting their butts doing all that. We'll get into what's coming this next year. We are working on quite a few larger projects for the park. The next one, or the closest one, is our cabins. So we're getting 2 cabins. They're single family cabins that you can rent. We are literally breaking ground on those probably in the next week or 2. And hopefully those will be built and ready to go by next summer for people to rent. If you're familiar with the park, this is basically where they're going to be. If you look on the bottom right-hand corner, the proposed cabin 640 and 630. Those are the two that are going to be built. So this is the Meadows loop of the campground. So there's some campsites to the left there. And these two cabins are going to be built right there off the Meadows loop. Another big project that we're working on is our Memorial Pavilion, which is going to be on the west side of the Visitor Center. That's something that was slated to be built with the Visitor Center when the park was originally made, but funds and all that kind of stuff kind of put an end to that. So we're getting back to that and putting this Memorial Pavilion in. This is a loose sketch of what it kind of looks like. But basically it'll have a fire pit out there, a gas fire pit, and then some areas for people that want to memorialize somebody on some big stone slabs out there. So that should be coming hopefully in the next year. The other big project that we're doing, and this is off the heels of what Governor Polis was working on, especially prior to all the pandemic stuff, but it is still slated to happen. But we're going to get a new campground loop. Governor Polis is big on allowing more people opportunities to camp and to visit state parks. So this was one of the areas that was a good fit for that plan. In the initial planning of the park, the kind of that brown area on the left hand of your screen there on the Google image there, that was originally slated to be an event center when the park was built. And the event center idea has kind of gone away, and we are planning on turning that into another campground loop. Hoping 15 campsites, give or take. So that should help us out a lot. Our campground is pretty much full from the beginning of March through the end of October, pretty much every single day. So there's definitely demand for people to camp here at the park and have that easy access to our trail system. So those are the main things that we have going on at the park. That is kind of all I have. I'll open it up to some questions if anybody has anything they want to ask or pick my brain on. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jason. I for one have to say that my family and I love going out there. It's very kid friendly. The trails are unbelievably well marked. And the kids actually really like being able to, they're very young, but they like actually being able to see where the signs are and actually lead our family where to go. So it's one of our favorite places to go. And for those of you on the poll that said you haven't been out there yet, check it out. So Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if there's any questions popping up.
Yeah. So Jason, we do have one question in regards to the ambassador program you have. Can you talk to us more about how many of those ambassadors are the mountain bike ambassadors, and talk a little bit about what they do?
Yeah, so initially the idea was to be about half and half mountain bikers, half hikers. It was a little harder to find people that wanted to do it for the mountain biking side. So I think out of our 30, I want to say we have about 12 or 13 of them that are mountain bikers. And they're basically leading by example, kind of showing everybody the proper trail etiquette, yielding, you know, this isn't a racetrack kind of thing, and showing people how to just be nice to other people. They're also, you know, stopping, talking to people, asking if they have questions, directions, anything like that. If we have first aid issues or medical issues out on the park, they're our first line of defense on those two.
Excellent. And one last question that we had as well is, what were some of the best wildlife sightings you had this year?
Yeah, I'm trying to think here. We obviously lots of bears, bobcats are a dime a dozen. We have some pretty cool trail camera pictures of a couple of mountain lions that we kept seeing several times. We have a trail cam right at the start of the Dixon Trail, and we saw those two mountain lions together several times on the Dixon Trail. So not to scare anybody, it was very few and far between. Maybe once every couple months we saw them, but yeah, a decent amount of mountain lion sightings, but we've never had any negative interactions with mountain lions or bears or anything like that.
Thank you, Jason. Well, that's all the questions we had for you.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Jason, and hopefully we'll all be seeing you out there soon.
Absolutely. Come on down.
All right, wonderful. So we have another quick poll question for the group before we go on to our next presenter, and it's related to wildfires. So have wildfires, or how have wildfires impacted your favorite outdoor space? And we have a couple different selections for you. One is I've seen no impact at all, or wildfires have affected one or more places that I like to go, but it didn't really impact me a whole lot. Or wildfires have indeed affected one of my favorite outdoor spaces. And it looks like most of you that are responding, almost 75% of you are saying that wildfires have affected one of your favorite spaces and you felt the impact greatly. So we hope that this next topic that we're going to be talking about will have some interest to you. Thanks for giving us those answers on that poll. So we know that this has been a really rough year for Colorado in relation to wildfires. Just most recently, it impacted one of our favorite places, Bear Creek. So from what I understand, and maybe we can get a little bit more information on this, fire mitigation did help contain that fire. We all know it could have been a lot worse. And we wanted to have a brief discussion today about why fire mitigation is so important in our parks and in our open spaces. So we're really lucky today to have with us Allison Monroe. She is a staff forester with the Colorado Springs Parks and Rec Department. Her primary responsibility is for the health and management of the trees along our urban streets. But she is coming with us or to us today with some information on fire mitigation as a pinch hitter. So thank you, Allison, for joining us. We're really excited to have you here today, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Beth. And yeah, I'm filling in for Dennis Will, who is our staff or city forester and our parks forester. Like Beth said, my primary responsibility are the street trees and the urban streetscapes, but as an avid parks user and somebody who was also very much affected by fires this summer in my recreational aspects, I am hopefully will be able to share a little bit of what we've found with our mitigation work. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get rolling. So I will say that these slides have come from Dennis, so one of his previous presentations. And I do have his contact information too, if there's more detailed information that you would like. I will do my best to answer any questions, but we'll give it a go. So. All right, so for this presentation, just really briefly, I wanted to focus on what is a healthy forest. So where naturally occurring forests or fires may have occurred. And we can't do that now in our world or our WUI areas or wildland urban interfaces. What managed restoration practices do we have now and what that may look like? So we have before and after pictures of just a couple of our open spaces, Stratton in particular, just to kind of get into the topic. And does it work? So looking at that Bear Creek fire and pictures from that. So what is a healthy forest? A healthy forest has a really good mix of species of flora, fauna, animals, and tree ages, sizes, species. We're looking at proper stand stocking, so the number of trees per acre. You know, right now, you know, you see a lot of our open spaces being really dense, and from an untrained eye, it may look like there's a whole bunch of trees all smushed in and animals, and it's all great and happy, but is that really healthy? So looking at, you know, genetic variation and the presence of mosaics or open spaces, mixing it up a little bit. So if you look at a healthy forest, we really look at the fact that there was a regular disturbance event. So that may be floods or avalanches, insect issues, or fires. And in our area, fully functional front range fire ecology may suggest fires occurred every 5 to 50 years, or that may be more normal. And some of our plant species that are here are evolved for that. And so when you look at now, do we still have that? We certainly haven't had any of those fires. So when we're trying to restore without using fire, we're looking at trying to bring that patchiness, those mosaics back in. So looking at more ponderosa versus that stand filling Douglas fir or oak, really trying to get those bigger openings. But at the same time, and Dennis really speaks to this, is not just doing a fire prescription, but looking at how do we make the stands healthier from an insect and disease perspective? How do we increase soil nutrients? And what kind of a treatment is acceptable to us, to our trail users? I mean, I'm one of them. I like to not just have a clear cut area, and that's certainly not a fire mitigation effort, but really looking at trying to mimic fire behavior. So we'll get right into that. Well, you'll get to see all of this. Okay, so this is what I was saying. This is an untreated area in Stratton in 2016, and I have to say, as a trail user, this is typically what I see, and what maybe somebody says is pretty natural. But if you're looking at it from a healthy forest perspective, it may not be so great. This is an after photo. And so again, it's not the clear cutting, you're seeing the good crown spacing, a mosaic pattern. So when you look at the gray oak scrub, you can see that there's patchiness. So you kind of had a little bit of a break in that fuels area. This is Stratton open space treated in 2017. And again, most of the fuels have been kind of removed from the understory. This is maybe what a naturally occurring, a place that has naturally occurring fires may look like. 3 years later, the oak brush is already coming right back in. So getting into, does this work? Bear Creek Canyon, the green hashed area is where we did fire mitigation work in 2016. And the red is where the fire actually burned. So I was talking about, fuels and the patchiness. Right here, you don't see any patchiness, right? The left pictures, you see oak, Gamble oak that is 6 to 7 feet tall. This is fairly typical in a lot of our open spaces. And you see lower limbs on ponderosas in both of those photos on the left. And so if you get a fire event, there's fuel that just leads right up to the ponderosas. And, once you get the fires in the ponderosa, in the crown fires, that is burning hotter. There's more fuel to burn. There's more wind. It really gets to be dangerous in your fire scenario. So this is after treatment. This is the following year after treatment. In 2017, we had a lot of moisture this year. So you can see the mosaic patterns, the clumping, which is, there are a lot of research studies that show this in areas that have had natural fires. The kind of fire takes this or that, but this is trying to mimic that. There's a lot of grass. We do grass seeding after our treatments, and the mulching for erosion control as well. And again, this is the following year. You can see that oak coming right back up in the bottom two pictures. So I'd like to challenge you, when you saw that first picture of Stratton, the before treatments, or what you may see out in most of our open spaces, compare that with the bottom right photo. And you can see those mosaics. It's not a clear cut. It's not wiping out everything. It's just trying to make good decisions about how we manage these from a healthy forest perspective. Okay, so this is the fire. We were very, very lucky with this. This did burn in our treatment area. The wind was blowing just in the right direction. And you can see those, the homeowners did do a lot of mitigation work as well, which is very critical. You can see how close this was to their homes. I really like this photo because it shows that crown spacing. Looking at that healthy forest, if you're a firefighter and you're looking at an aerial drop for fuels for retardant, you can see exactly where you're going. You can see that line of fire. And that was something that was said to Dennis and then to me as I was on site. The firefighters were able to get in there more aggressively treat this fire because they could see everything. They could have a better safety net, if you will, and have access to these areas. The other really important thing, and this is what I find fascinating, and I'd recommend if you hike in this area, even if you don't, go and take a look, because you'll see where the fire moved through, but there's still sticks, there's grass, there's, you know, a lot of the ponderosas are fine. They are singed, they're a little more yellowed, but they were evolved to basically be nourished by fires. You know, if you look in the bottom right photo, these, you scrape a little bit of that soot off and the bark is fine underneath. Some of these trees, if they are really, really singed, they may be more subject to insect or disease issues, but when you look at most of this and you look at the fuels that are still available on the ground, you see that this was that cool burning surface fire, which is what you want. So some of the observations that we did see was that there was some crown torching where the fire went up into the crown of the ponderosa, which is what, you know, we see in some of these larger fires where you've just got out of control fires. We saw a little bit of this in some of the treatment areas that were treated by hand. You know, when we did mechanical and hand treatment, and hand treatment is really expensive. It's really difficult to get in there and kind of cut every little stick by hand, right? But the mastication efforts, you're better able to create those mosaics, which helps influence that fire behavior. And again, the firefighters were greatly assisted in being able to do their job to see what was going on here. So, you know, again, we were really lucky. Bear Creek watershed was in the background. If this had blown a different way out of a treatment area, we would be looking at something much, much different. And this is something that, you know, I know Dennis, this is his passion. We're very lucky to have him. And, you know, he's looking out for these areas in our open spaces that are in these wildland urban interface areas that are very close to homes, that are in these areas that we want to go out in and recreate in, and, you know, maybe see a little bit more of a healthy forest for now. Hope a fire doesn't come, but certainly avoid total devastation. So making forest management practices a higher priority before the burn. Yes, it's expensive, but it is nowhere near disaster relief expenses and mitigation effects that can persist for years later. You know, even 7-year-old fuel treatments can be effective. Handwork treatments by homeowners, creating defensible space greatly assists firefighters, you know, whether it's on this small scale of homeowners or it's a major fuels mitigation project, what we did. And then mastication treatments, they are more effective than handwork in the oak brush in particular. And really creating that different look, reducing some of that ladder fuel, creating adequate spacing for these ponderosas that reduces crown torching and assists keeping the fire on the ground. So I think that's about all I've got. A quick nutshell, that is Dennis's contact information. But if you wanted to see if we have any questions, we can go ahead.
Allison, thank you so much. That's really interesting information for us. I think that for a lot of people that are out using our trails and our open spaces, sometimes they take for granted all of that behind the scenes work that is taking place to protect those very spaces and us. So that's a really, really interesting deep dive for a lot of us. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Aaron, did we have any questions pop up during that time?
Yes, we did. So Allison, we have one question. Actually, we have two questions. Did they determine a cause for the Bear Creek fire?
I do not know that, but I'm not sure. I think I know where it started, but it was within our fuel treatment area, but I think that was still under investigation when I was out there last.
All right. And a second question that we have is, what is the mastication process?
So there's a lot of different equipment that can be used, especially when you're on not as steep of an area, and that's kind of where our boundary stopped in Bear Creek, not only per property line, but for our equipment. So when you're doing mastication, And again, Dennis could probably speak more to this because he loves all the toys out there, but kind of a mechanized one operator can probably treat on a wheeled device, can treat maybe 3 to 5 acres a day. In comparison, a hand crew may get half an acre, and that would be with chainsaws, a chipper that kind of is on a track chipper. So those are a little insight into that.
All right, and one last question that we have is, what are other areas planned for forest mitigation in your town, and where will that funding come from?
Again, this is the best question for Dennis. This is really what he lives, he sleeps, eats, breathes, all of that. He's done a fantastic job with grants, finding grants. We've also partnered with fire department, CSU, because a lot of this it's in everyone's backyards, right? So the same way that homeowners can do work, fire department and CSU and Pikes Peak National Forest, all of those partnerships are really important. I do know that one of the more recent programs was there's been a lot of work done in Ute Valley Park. That has been more from the wildland team for the fire department. And I think Dennis could probably answer as far as what's happening in the future. I'm not 100% sure.
All right, and that was all the questions we had.
Allison, thank you for that. And what we can do is we can actually go ahead and email Dennis those questions and make sure that we get those answers out in our post Zoom email. But in the meantime, Allison, thank you so much for stepping in on his behalf. Such interesting and great information. So glad to have you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I know that we lost Britt earlier, and from what I understand, she was so generous with her time to stay on the call with us so that she could answer those questions that we had earlier. Britt, are you still with us by chance? There she is. Thank you so much for staying on for this entire Zoom with us. Erin, would you mind popping back up with those questions so that we can actually get those answered?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so Britt, the last question was that you started answering was that this person's concerned about the damage to the critical geologic assets. What are the initial thoughts on how to protect these once it's open to the public, and will some areas remain closed?
Well, and I think I started to say that we are researching best practices from other national parks and World Heritage sites and all of the places that have already tackled this kind of question. But I also wanted to reach out to anybody on the Zoom meeting with special expertise. Contact me if you've got expertise in that area as well, because certainly we know that the bluffs there are fragile, and that's where some of the special resources are located. We definitely don't want to destroy anything that's irreplaceable. And I don't think it's an insurmountable goal to be able to open it to the public, but also protect these resources. So that's what our goal will be, and we'll be working toward that. And of course, very cognizant of all of the resources, but recognizing that the geologic resources are extra special there as well.
Fantastic. And the other question we had was, what work was proposed to be done by parks prior to the master plan to reduce the cost of a consultant?
So some of that work is really in cataloging and getting a good baseline inventory on the wildlife and biological resources that exist in this area. So we've started that work already. And we also have this amazing teams of TOPS rangers who have also been doing that kind of work with us. One of the special areas of focus has been on our raptor species that use these cliffs as their nesting sites. And it's fascinating to see what great resources are there for these raptor species. We've also done some special studies with bats and understanding, because over at Jimmy Camp Creek, we've got a lot of interesting bats that are also using that site. We have wildlife cams set up, and you would be amazed to see kind of the interactions and the amazing wildlife. The other thing I wanted to do, and I started to talk about, was really a riparian study of the Jimmy Camp Creek water resources. So we understand that hydrology and understand how to preserve it in its natural system and make sure that's not overwhelmed. If development happens to the north and all of that development runoff is coming into Jimmy Camp, what we can do to protect that riparian resource as well. And of course, the paleontological research will go forward. Archaeological research, we've got historical aspects that we also need to research. So there's an awful lot of study that can be done. And I'm open-minded if anybody wants to contact me with other study that would help us not only enhance our knowledge, but also reduce the cost of that big master plan process, because it's going to be amazing once we get going.
All right, Brett, that was all the questions we had. We got them all answered.
Thank you again, Brett, for staying on to answer those questions. We appreciate your time very much. And
Sorry about the internet.
fascinating info. So we're now at the end of our trail mixer, but we are going to go ahead and pull up all of our staff and our presenters. And if any of you have any questions that we forgot to ask any of our presenters, or if you have any questions about anything happening at staff relating to our programs, old programs, new programs, this is a great time to ask. And while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I did have to get a special shout out to Alan, because I realized we have been doing a handful of these trail mixers, and many of us get to speak, but Alan is the one driving all of this behind the scenes to make sure that it goes flawlessly, from setting up the Zoom to coordinating with our speakers, to making sure a link goes out to all of you that watch this post event. So Alan, just want to make sure that you get a big kudos and a big thank you, because you do so much work to make these happen and make the rest of us look good. So thank you. And Aaron, do we have any questions coming on in for anybody?
Yes, we do. And the first one I came up with is if there's any updates on Untrash Your Parks, which was the Indie Give competition that we were in, the friendly competition with Medicine Wheel and Rimpey. And Medicine Wheel did come through with the victory. And although the community raised close to $7,000 in 4 days between the three organizations, and Medicine Wheel came on top. And today we spent a wonderful hour out in Red Rock Canyon picking up trash in our Christmas sweaters.
Which is why many of us have hat head right now.
And let me guess, Corey asked that question, right?
All right, and let's see, we're still waiting for any other questions coming in, and nothing yet so far.
Well, I would like to give a shout out to one of our board members, Margie Oldham, and she's the one that comes up with our really cool trivia questions and that neat little animated slide that kind of starts out the whole presentation. And I apologize, it should have had music tonight, but my computer crashed just before this, and so we recovered well. And thank you again, Margie, for the amazing trivia.
Wonderful. Well, it doesn't sound like any more questions are coming through. So hopefully that means that we answered all your questions during our presentations and our wonderful newsletters that Cherie puts out every week. And we've left you not questioning anything. So that's great. Again, we thank you very much for joining us. We thank you for being members. It is because of your membership and your generous donations that we continue to do all of this amazing work. And we appreciate you so much. We especially appreciate your support through this very interesting and challenging 2020, which we were almost complete with and ready for a new year. So as we sign off, we're going to wish you all a very happy holiday and wish for a very great new year.
Happy holiday.
Look forward to seeing you all out in the parks and trails.
Indeed.